Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
2022 has started off with a bang. Ladies and gentlemen, the brand new Adidas Predator Edge.1 low, the 19th generation of Predator, this likely to be the most popular top-end variation, and seeing what is a similar concept but a pretty significant redesign coming from the Predator Freak that it replaces. And I don't want to start this review with my concluding thoughts, but being that this was a football boot that I was very excited about, now that I've actually had the opportunity to try them, I'm a lot less excited. There are some good things, there are some bad things, and there's even more questionable things in regards to these boots that I'm going to point out for you in today's review, including how they fit and feel on feet. So if you're planning on the new Predators for your new boots in 2022, the information in this video should help you out tremendously. If you're interested in learning more, please stick around, and if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can get them below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by way of the first link down below. And if you guys appreciate the honesty in regards to what's good and bad, please don't forget to support this one with a like, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel along with hitting that bell notification so you can keep up with new boot reviews all throughout the year. So first things first, we are not going to discuss the looks. That's something that's purely subjective. Everyone has their own opinion, and if you want to argue amongst yourselves about that down below in the comment section, be my guest. What is worth talking about, however, is the upper of this football boot, which utilizes on paper pretty well all of the same elements as the Predator Freak that it replaces, with a prime knit base, a lacing system on the 0.1 model, as well as SL rubber scattered across the upper. However, all of those elements have been, let's say, reformulated to kind of give you a remix of the original recipe that was introduced with the Predator 20 Plus Mutator. Unfortunately, I don't think it's a very good remix. So if we start with the prime knit base of the upper, you can see that the general pattern hasn't really changed all that much. From a thickness standpoint, it feels pretty similar in hand, and even the elasticated section across the top of the foot where the laces are positioned is pretty similar. They've made it a little bit more dense, and because of that, they were able to eliminate that little internal reinforcement piece that was stuck on the Predator Freak 0.1 low. That's now gone, and I think that's actually a pretty good decision. However, this prime knit material, and I'm not sure if it's because of the new design of the Predator element, their zone skin, if you will, or if it has to do with the liner on the inside just being, I guess, thicker or more glue to combine all of the layers. This is a material that feels rock hard. Like, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it's one of those football boots where when you put them on your feet, they maintain the same shape that they have right now. And that is typically not what you want to have in a pair of football boots. You want them to form to the shape of your foot. You want them to have that custom sensation. And of course, some boots do require break-in time in order for that to happen. That's definitely going to be the case with the Predator Edge.1. This is not one of those football boots that feels exceptionally comfortable out of the box, but even after some wear time, there's so much structural integrity to this material and such a lack of softness and pliability because of all the reasons I just mentioned that it just doesn't feel very nice on your feet. And that in 2022 for a $250 football boot is pretty unacceptable. It was my one complaint about the outgoing Predator models, and if anything, this prime knit upper is the worst one the brand has ever put out. As for what's happening on top of the prime knit upper, highlighted here in bright orange, the zone skin elements, of course, replace the demon skin spikes found on the last two generations of Predator. They're still made from the same SL rubber material, which means tons and tons of extra grip on the ball when it makes contact. And given the fact that the entire upper is covered in this rubber material, there is so much extra grip to the same extent as what was seen on the last two generations of Predator. It's kind of just a different formulation, which from a durability perspective, given that these have only been out for a couple of days, nobody really knows whether or not this will be more durable than the demon skin spikes, but just betting on the fact that you have these longer pieces of material that are glued all the way along the bottom I would expect these to hold up better rather than having individual demon skin spikes fall off with the previous generation, which was pretty common over time. Not necessarily detrimental to the performance because you were never going to strip them all off the upper, but this should hold up significantly better. Also, Adidas did a lot of marketing around the fact that this is 10 years after the original Predator LZ, which is also part of the reason why this is launching in the same blue and orange. However, while these are elements that are Predator LZ-like, I think these are a lot more along the lines of what was last seen on the Predator Instinct in terms of having this kind of sharp edge to the element itself. They are the most significant or raised the highest in this area of the foot, kind of the main striking zone. And then they thin out quite significantly here through the midfoot on the medial side, kind of taper down slightly through the forefoot area, and then are very, very slim and thin here along the lateral side of the foot. Nonetheless, it's rubber, it's super sticky, and if you want tons and tons of extra grip on the ball, you are going to get that. Whether or not it is better or worse performance from a grip standpoint compared to the demon skin spikes on the previous generation, I think that's pretty much impossible to say. They feel equally as grippy to me, and I didn't say that there was a noticeable difference in performance or even in feel, but what I will say about this is, unlike the demon skin spikes, which are just these individual things scattered across the upper, these longer pieces of rubber do have more stiffness to them and don't allow the upper to bend quite as nicely. And you'll see this during the on-feet portion of the video, especially with that really stiff upper that has that predetermined shape. When you bend your foot, you get some horrible creases in the upper that, because the upper is so firm and stiff, you actually feel digging into your foot. Not to the point where it's uncomfortable and going to cause blisters, but it doesn't necessarily feel good, especially when compared to other football boots in the $250 price range. As for the lacing system, being that this is the Edge.1, you'll notice that the laces have been pushed slightly to the lateral side, at least towards the bottom half of the lacing setup, and then it kind of makes its way to the middle as you get towards the top. I like this for the reason that it eliminates any kind of lacing in this area of the foot where you're striking the ball. But what I did notice in regards to this off-centered lacing system is that because of this one-piece upper construction, you do have a little section of lace that actually runs from this lace hole to this lace hole, and because of the stiffness and rigidity of the upper, you can actually feel that little section of lace being pushed against the top of your foot, kind of right on the bone. And it's not, again, to the point where the boots are unwearable, but it's an uncomfortable sensation that I really don't notice in other football boots that also feature a one-piece upper construction, something that is super common to see these days. As for the rear of the boot, you are going to find that it does have an internal plastic heel counter, and of course this is the Edge.1 low, which does not have any form of collar, although it does extend a little bit higher at the back as well as the front, and then kind of has this deep V cut, especially on the lateral side, that looks more extreme than it actually feels. The opening is not very big. These are actually more difficult to put on than the mid-cut model. However, I do think visually they're much better looking than the mid-cut variations, simply due to the fact that you don't have what looks to be a ton of extra bulk and material around the ankle. Not to say that the mid-cut ones feel bad, but if I had the choice, I'd probably go for the low if I were going for a Predator Edge. Internally, the heel liner is pretty well the same as the previous generation Predator. It has this soft, kind of like synthetic material. It's not quite a suede, it's not quite a microfiber material, but it does feel quite good and does a good job of grabbing your socks and holding it in place. The heel feels very secure in general. And then the insole is, of course, fully removable. I'll give you guys a quick look at that. Not really any changes from the previous generation in that it's this soft material on the surface, and then it's made from a single layer of this black foam. Which brings us to the base of the boot, which features the new Facet Frame, something that was computer generated in Minecraft. I'm just kidding. I think the angular look actually looks really cool, but it's still a split sole like the model it replaces, and honestly doesn't feel that different as a sole plate base. The big talking point, however, is the fact that they've added a weight here in the form of this metal piece right at the tip of the toe in an attempt to increase weight in an area of the foot closer to the tip of the toe that, according to Adidas, based on absolutely no other information, will help to increase the power of your shot. And we've seen Adidas incorporate weighted elements in the forefoot on previous generation Predator models. The last one to do it was the Predator Power Swerve. And there's an argument to be made that every time they did it, it was a little bit of a gimmicky element, but at the very least, they were specific about the amount of weight and gave reasons as to why they included it, including how much power you should expect as a Predator customer to get out of that extra weight that you can only get in a Predator model. This time around with the Predator Edge, all they've said is there's weight here, we have no idea how much, and we have no idea what effect it's actually having. So how effective it is, I guess nobody really knows except for Adidas themselves, if they even did a study, because I feel like if they did, they would have shown that information. But what I can tell you from personal experience is that it's not an amount of weight that feels noticeable when the boots are on feet. Shooting with the ball felt no different. It didn't feel like I had more power in my shot, and if anything, it doesn't even feel like the balance of the boot has changed at all. It's not toe heavy or anything like that, and at the very least, in regards to the last time Adidas incorporated tech like this, you could at least tell that there was significant added weight in that spot on the foot. That is not the case here. I just don't think this is doing very much, and what's even funnier is that there's going to be plenty of people that know nothing about football boots that are going to end up at an Adidas store, buy a pair of these, and not even realize that this metal weight at the front is supposed to be a feature. As for the stud pattern, it's technically redesigned as well, despite being the same general layout. The difference this time around, instead of having some rounded edges, it's now kind of perfect triangles all throughout. Kind of reminiscent of what we've seen from some messy stud patterns in the past, and I would say a smidge more aggressive, but in general, not a gigantic difference from the outgoing Predator, but I would say a slight improvement. Which brings us to the weight, where given the fact that they have added a metal weight at the tip of the toe, these should weigh more than the Predator Freak Point 1 low that they replace. We're gonna find that out both in the same size 9.5 US, starting off with the outgoing Freak, and you can see that they weigh in at 8.3 ounces, the equivalent of 235 grams, kind of average for a top-end football boot. Pull that off the scale and throw on the Predator Edge.1 low, and you can see that they weigh in at 9.2 ounces, the equivalent of 260 grams, which is a 25 gram or almost full ounce weight difference between the new one and the old one, where the old one is, I would say, a noticeable amount of weight lighter. However, I don't think that you're buying either of these football boots for a super light feel. Just know that this is a football boot that has not gone on a weight loss journey. On feet, the Predator Edge.1 doesn't feel like any other football boot. Unfortunately, that is not a compliment. I think this is one of those boots that's going to surprise a lot of people when they try them on for the first time, in that this upper is just so incredibly stiff. I mentioned earlier in the video that the boot has its predetermined shape, and even as I'm wearing them right now with the laces tied as tight as they can go, it hasn't changed shape from how they looked with nobody's feet inside of them. And that's simply down to the fact that this prime knit upper, due to a bunch of different reasons, whether it's just a stiffer material, the glue holding all the layers together, a new liner, the edge elements themselves, I'm not sure what they've done, but this football boot feels stiff and rigid, and like your foot is sitting inside of this predetermined shape rather than the upper forming to the shape of your foot and wrapping it as closely as possible. There's extra space through the forefoot and toe box area, which is wider, rounder, and higher volume than it was before. And you can see when your foot bends, the amount of ugly folds and creases you get in the upper, where you can actually feel it pressing into your foot. It's just not a good sensation, something that you do not expect from any football boot, let alone one that costs $250. They have widened the boot a little bit through the midfoot, which I personally find more comfortable from the last two generations of Predator, so that's okay. And I think the heel does fit quite securely as well, so no complaints there. But the general shape of the boot in combination with the stiffness of the upper, it's just really questionable. And the only thing I can kind of compare it to as far as feel is concerned is going way back for those that actually had a pair of $400 Nike Mercurial Superfly 2s. That Tajin synthetic upper with the flywire reinforcement was incredibly stiff. This kind of has that same general feel to it. As far as width is concerned, it's kind of tricky to say that these are going to be great for one specific foot type, mainly based on the fact that the forefoot and toe box area is super wide with tons of extra volume and it's very rounded shape, but the midfoot and heel still fit quite snug and in general have a slimmer overall profile to them. It's a shape that feels kind of unbalanced, similar to the last several generations of Predator. If you fit in those, you're still going to fit in these. But I wouldn't say that this is an ideal option for somebody with really wide feet, despite all the width through the forefoot and toe box area. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. Sizing has not changed from the previous generation Predator, so if you are looking to order a pair for yourself, I would recommend going true to size. So in conclusion, I am pretty disappointed. I like even though this has nothing to do with performance, the new look. I think this is aesthetically a much more attractive football boot than the last two spiky Predator models. I'll also say that I prefer the shape, especially through the midfoot. I find that little bit of extra width significantly more comfortable for my foot type at least, especially being slightly flatter foot. And I think they have made some improvements with the stud pattern, even if they're just very subtle. Not to mention, I do think the zone skin elements do offer a little bit more coverage and perhaps that little bit of extra grip, but I wouldn't say it's a gigantic difference. Everything else, however, I just don't care for. On paper, I love the idea of the Predator Edge, and it still has the merit of providing more grip on the ball than any other current model football boot by a long shot. But at the end of the day, if they're not comfortable, and I think that's something that's going to surprise a lot of people when they get the chance to try them on, are they really worth your time? I guess the best comparison I can make is the original Nike Hypervenom Phantom 2. That was an upper that just doesn't feel good, and this is an upper that just doesn't feel good.